Welcome to this video about the top 10 plants not worth growing in the exotic garden in the Northern Hemisphere. At number 10 we have Petasites. Petasites is related to the common butterbur. It has big leaves, or mat leaves, that get a rounded shape. They can be variegated. It can be yellows and whites as well as green. These are very hardy plants, have sort of daisy-like flowers, but the big disadvantage of this plant, and why is it number 10, is because it spreads absolutely everywhere, and in hot weather the leaves just flop over as well, and it starts dying back sort of by mid to late summer. So although it looks great and early in the year, and if you can contain it, it does get out of hand very easily, and it looks pretty poor from late summer onwards. So that's why it's a plant really not worth growing in the exotic garden. Now at number 9 in this list we have got Sasa bamboos, including Sasa palmata. These have very nice glossy leaves, quite large for bamboos, and it does give a jungly, exotic feel to a garden, and it's hardy, very hardy indeed. Again, the trouble with this plant is it can be completely out of control. It sends runners absolutely everywhere. It'll grow in pretty much all soil types and take over, and it's almost impossible to dig out. Really hard to cut through the roots and the rhizomes, and if you get it into a mixed border, it's almost impossible to get out. So that's why Sasa is at number 9. At number 8 we have got the coconut. Now the coconut, or Coconus nucifer, is a great exotic plant, probably the epitome of exotics when it comes to palm trees, thinking of coconuts, and you often get this in the houseplant section of garden centres and even some supermarkets, and it's very tempting to buy this plant thinking it'd be okay indoors. Trouble with this is almost certainly it'll die within 9-12 months, maybe 6 months, even with looking after it, mainly because it needs really high light levels all year round. It needs to be really warm all year round, and it needs to have some decent humidity as well all year round, which is almost impossible to keep in a Northern Hemisphere garden. Number 7 we have the phoenix palms. These include the Canary Island date palm, the pygmy palm, and also the real date palm as well. The reason I've chosen these are, although they're really readily available, especially pygmy palm and the Canary Island date palm, they're not hardy plants, and they're very slow growing in terms of the true date palm. If you get a pygmy palm, they look fantastic indoors, but you must remember to bring them indoors and keep them well watered. They can't be left outside. And the date palm is such a slow growing palm in the UK and northern latitudes, it's really not worth growing. And then the Canary Island date palm, fantastic plant, and it will grow big in favourable locations in the UK, and it can get really big, and that can cause problems because it can damage walls and fences, because quite often they're planted far too close to structures and other plants, and if you get a really cold winter, then unfortunately it kills the palm, and then you've got this huge great big palm base to get rid of, and it's such a hard thing to dig up, and also has huge big thorns which can cause big wounds if you're not careful, especially if you get it into your face. And these obviously can be septic as well if you get a really bad injury with that. So not an ideal palm to grow, and one that I would avoid if at all possible. At number 6 we have something a bit controversial, and that is cannas. Why do I say cannas? Well, the problem with cannas is so many of the readily available cannas have cannaviruses, and if you buy it from most garden centres, DIY shops, etc., they will show the virus in the first year very often, and if not in the second year, with poor growth. And this unfortunately can infect lots of other cannas in surrounding streets and gardens, and others in your garden as well. So cannas from reputable sellers which have a track record of not selling infected plants are the ones to go for. If you get it from general sort of shops, etc., they can have this virus which can devastate the plants, and therefore not worth growing because they die or look really poorly after a year or two. At number 5 we have a type of palm tree which not many people grow, but if you want to get a full collection of Trachycarpus palms, you'll try to get a Trachycarpus germani sectus, and it's great to tick it off a list to say you've got it, but unfortunately it's such a slow growing palm tree. Really slow. 1 or 2 leaves and you're doing really well if you get that in a year. 3 leaves is like the limit, I think, at the moment in this country, even with a really warm summer. They are so slow. They'll damage if it gets really cold weather as well, so they're not particularly that hardy without protection. And even after several years, the ones I've had for 5, 6, 7 years are still tiny, no bigger really than my outstretched hand, so not really worth growing. At number 5, again another type of palm tree, and that is the family called Sabal or Sabals. Sabal minor is the common one. There's lots of other types as well. Again, you can buy big plants of this, small plants of this, and you might get a leaf or 2 a year, but they are such slow growing plants in this location. In the USA and much warmer continental climates they will grow well, but in maritime UK climate they are such slow plants because they need days and weeks over 30 degrees to grow really well, and definitely over 25 degrees to start growing decently at all, which we don't get enough time in our summer for good growth, so I would avoid Sabal palms. At number 4 we have Colocasia Black Magic. This is quite a common form that you'll find for sale quite often on eBay and other garden centres. It looks stunning, it's got fantastic black leaves. You can grow it sort of in shallow water in warm places, you can grow it in the ground or in pots, and it looks fantastic in the summer, and if you get it for 1 year you'll think it's great. The trouble is trying to overwinter Black Magic. It needs to be kept really warm and in good light again, so at least 15-20 degrees really. It needs to be a really warm room in a house or a heated greenhouse. It might struggle through and look really rubbish over winter and then get good again next year, but it's so finicky. There's so many other good colocasias to grow, such as Mammoth and Jack's Giant and Fontisii, that such much better growers in the cool climate we have, and easier to overwinter as well. Pink China being the easiest one of all to overwinter. You can even overwinter it in the ground once it's established. So Black Magic is one I would totally avoid. At number 2 we have a banana, and this is Siam Ruby. Siam Ruby looks stunning with its red leaves, speckles, sort of yellows and greens, but it's mainly like a maroon colour, really beautiful, well, ruby coloured leaves. Trouble is, again, this is a plant that needs really hot weather to grow well, really warm weather to get good growth on it, and it is such a difficult plant to overwinter, and it normally goes a bit greenish and looks a bit sick, and you really need really high temperatures on a heat mat in good light, keeping it watered and growing over winter if you want it to go through to 2nd or 3rd year and start looking good. Again, it's one to avoid simply because it's so hard to grow. So many other easier bananas to grow, such as Sycamensis, obviously Bazu, and the Unsete bananas as well. So again, I would avoid Siam Ruby. And at number 1 we have got a group of plants that you'll see all over in exotic tropical gardens, and that is alocasias. Alocasias you can get from small to absolutely huge leaves. They can look stunning. You'll see pictures of them in gardens, especially US gardens, and obviously the Far East gardens as well, and Australia. And they can grow big leaves, and you can get ones that are cold tolerant and they will grow in cool weather. The trouble is, come winter, if they go dormant, really dormant, so the leaves die back, they are such hard plants to get going the next year. You have to give them so much heat, mostly anyway, to get them going the next year. Things like Alocasia Mayan mask is a good example of that, which needs a lot of heat to get going. So although it's a fantastic plant and it might be worth growing one or two, overall you'll find after a few years of growing it, it's better to stick to things like the colocasias for big leaves and maybe the arum lilies as well, such as the xanthodecia, which has similar style leaves but much easier to grow. So that's my top 10 plants that, although look fantastic in a jungle and exotic setting, are very tricky to grow for various reasons or are very invasive, and I wouldn't suggest you grow them if you're starting out in exotic gardening in the UK or similar climates. You may disagree or you may agree with my choices. Let me know in the comments below. Some of those plants you might strongly disagree with, especially the colocasias and alocasias. But let me know what you think, and let me know your sort of growing experiences with these plants, and if you've had success with any of these plants, let me know. Thanks for watching.